Thank you. I'm just going to make some brief remarks here. This is usually the most difficult session, last session, and we have the dual difficulty of number one, keeping you awake, especially myself awake, because last night I just flew in from all the way from Ghana in West Africa, and I flew into KL, and this morning flew into Cambodia. So how to keep myself awake and all of you awake, as well as the recognition that this is the session before the afternoon tea, right? So let's try to do this in the most efficient manner. And we are concerned about ASEAN connectivity. How do we connect markets and opportunities within and outside of ASEAN? First of all, how could we improve ASEAN connectivity? How can business and society, as the previous panel mentioned, how to enhance ESG, but for us, how do we benefit from the connectivity in terms of the digital dimension, the transport and logistics dimension, as well as telecommunication and information sector? How do we better connect these sectors? And ultimately, how do we better connect the peoples of ASEAN? To start with this session, I would have, well, all the speakers have been eminently introduced just now. And to start the session, we will have the former chairman of ASEAN Business Advisory Council and also the vice chairman of the Federation of Thai Industries, Mr. Arin Jira, to give us an overview as to how we view connectivity in ASEAN. Mr. Jira, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Arin Jira, and you will notice that my last name is probably the shortest last name you can find in Thailand. Let me first thank the organizer, KSI, and particularly Tansi Michael Yeo, who invited me to participate in this important forum. Let me just say that connectivity is quite important. That's why they put us last. I've never spoken before a crowd of this large, 50 plus at most. Anyway, I think if you look at effective connectivity, it brings new ideas, and with the help of technology and innovation today, can steer global sustainability, and that's what we really want. Now, connectivity can also scale up micro, small, medium enterprises or MSMEs, and it can attract more investors through ease of doing business and skills that would allow workforce for long-term competitiveness. Now, we want cohesive and regional and responsive regions, so we need to build on connectivity. It strengthens also trade services, especially under rapid changes of global economic environment. Now, how can we enhance connectivity? I think of four things. In fact, three, but okay, let me just tell you all the four. The first one is digital infrastructure. We talk about digital disruption, and this one is really good disruption and not bad disruption. Digital disruption will stay with us until we find something new better than this. We have to live with this 4.0 era, and this is something that we must concentrate in. With digital infrastructure good, digital literacy is more important as the next step. If you don't understand digital infrastructure, you don't understand digital equipment, there's no use. So we must educate people and make sure that our digital literacy is up to par, up to standards. Next one along the line would be digital transformation. And that is probably the difficult part. But I'm sure we can overcome that once we have good digital literacy. We must not forget cybersecurity, because as you are a good hacker, you make sure that people keep you intact. We need to build on our sustainable digital future because, as I said earlier, it's going to be with us for a long time. Human resources, upskilling, reskilling play a very important role. In this current environment, changing global business environment, and particularly the economic plight that every country is faced with right now. And by the way, we want peaceful connectivity and not connectivity with conflict. Once you have good digital infrastructure, the thing that follows would be physical infrastructure. If you keep building roads, highways, airports, logistics go down, you build all these things, the growth, the economic growth will follow. So you keep building. This is what I think we should be doing. It's, I think we've seen this in the West, and ASEAN should follow the way the West it's been doing in terms of building, and building. So that's the second one. The third one has to do with the government. Government regulations and policy must encourage sustainable connectivity and be flexible enough to ease burden on business people, trading, particularly, again, for MSMEs. MSMEs are our backbone, our economic backbone. In every country in ASEAN, you'll find that MSME is probably more than 90% of the total business. We talk a lot about helping MSMEs in terms of financial assistance, but I think MSMEs must also look at helping themselves by, I'd say, consolidation. If you make yourself bigger, if you become bigger, you have more power to stay in the business. But if you keep on asking the government for help, one day you might die, because every day, MSME is born every day, MSME dies every day. Frequent change of regulations and policies creates uncertainty. And if the change is to improve connectivity, I think that's good, that's fine. But if the change restricts flow of business, then it is useless. We have been telling the government that we should, the government of ASEAN, by the way, that we should let the low-value shipments pass without any inspection. We should have seamless cross-border movement of goods. Because, if you ease the customs bureaucracies, you make sure that the manual procedures by customs are cut out and use some kind of digital, single digital method. I think that's going to help a lot in terms of clearing goods, and that's going to increase the pace of trading among all ASEAN companies. The final one, I'd like to talk about key obstacle preventing effective connectivity. And that's very simple. You may have heard of non-tariff barriers, non-tariff measures. These are protective of connectivity in terms of, well, it's going to hinder connectivity, that's for sure. Non-tariff barriers, if you look at today, I think we've been talking about eliminating non-tariff barriers and non-tariff measures with the ASEAN governments for some time. Today, we haven't really seen much of any elimination, much less contain. We cannot contain NTBs, NTMs. And sometimes NTBs or NTMs will just happen when you get to the border. And that's something that I think we should ask the government not to do so and make sure that they protect the business people. Now, if you look at on the other side, the business people should also study, NTBs, NTMs. What I'm encouraging the government to do is to make sure that they give grace periods for NTBs and NTMs. Otherwise, You know, it's difficult to do business. Once it's difficult to do business, connectivity doesn't work. You have heard also about ASEAN single window. ASEAN single window, the governments of ASEAN, you know, have been working on this particular item for, I think, 18 years, and we're still counting. We haven't really accomplished that particular goal. You know, set aside national single windows. All this is, I'd say, to me personally, it's in a mess. But hopefully one day we will reach that goal. Now, if you look at some of the benefits that we will have once we have improved digital transport, telecommunications, this will strengthen cooperation, collaboration. We need to collaborate and cooperate in competition. If you keep competing with each other in ASEAN countries, you're not going to go anywhere. Some speakers talking about 10 sticks you cannot break, one stick easy to make, easy to break. This is the same concept. If we stick together, we can compete with our trading partners, we can compete with the global competitors. The bigger ones you don't have to worry about. I think we should concentrate on helping MSMEs. With improved digital system, we can enhance communication flexibility, faster, more accurate supply flow. Today, you know, with improved digital system, you don't need encyclopedia. You want anything, you go into Google. Google tells you everything. Everywhere you go, it's under the palm of your hand. There's cost reduction in shipping time, cost reduction in everything because of the fast system of cyber system. If you look at e-commerce today, it has grown a lot. Now, before COVID, the senior minister was talking about FDI coming into ASEAN of what, about 190 billion US dollars. And then it came down in 2020 because of COVID. But the good news is e-commerce has gone up because of work from home. You know, instead of traveling to your office, you don't need to do that. You can Zoom, you can do video conference. That's a much simpler thing to do. Now, some people don't like that, including myself, because if you don't see people face to face, it's not so easy to communicate. Sometimes you want to say something, but you say, oh, forget it. You know, if you do it by video, forget it. I don't want to talk about it. But if you confront each other, I think that is better. But anyway, my point is, e-commerce is increasing, and you know, if you look at statistics, in the developed countries like the US and perhaps in ASEAN, it's Singapore, the e-commerce level on retail sales probably something like about 10%. But the average in other ASEAN countries is less than 3% in terms of e-commerce. With good transport, telecommunication, connectivity, we can also upgrade living conditions and standards. Today, we have a lot of digital payments, tools. You can do everything on the phone. Now, the only one thing to remember is that don't lose your phone. You lose your phone, and that day you cannot sleep because you can't do anything. Now, I think if you look at the total system of how we can advance people connectivity, again, you know, we talked about improved digital infrastructure, ease of internet communication. ASEAN should develop a harmonized and affordable digital rates. You go from one border from Laos to, from border of Thailand to the border town, and all of a sudden it switches over to Laos system, service provider, the cost is up. We have to work together to ensure that the digital rates are uniform. And again, you know, back to this collaboration and cooperation. We need to ensure success in digital transformation through collective collaboration, collective cooperation from governments, from private sectors, and all international partners. Knowledge sharing is important, and you have good internet system, you can share knowledge easily. You scale up e-commerce, make sure that e-commerce is growing. One other important aspect of people connectivity is the tourism industry. This is a GDP booster, and everybody wants that. Before COVID, Thailand had 40 million visitors. Year after COVID, we had 450,000 tourists. We've lost all our money. I mean, the opportunity cost right there. So, tourism industry is important, very important. And again, I go back to this elimination of NTBs, NTMs, make sure that we have reasonable outreach programs to announce NTBs and NTMs. And hopefully one day the ASEAN governments and the ministers of trade would sit down and try to eliminate NTBs and NTMs so that we can live happily ever after. I'll stop here.
Well, thank you, Mr. Jira. I think you not only have one of the shortest Thai names, you also control your time very well, just in time. Mr. Jila talked about the importance of connectivity, that it would generate new ideas for innovations, it could scale up the MSMEs, it could enhance long-term sustainability, for example. He outlined also the importance of digital infrastructure as we undertake digital disruption, as we improve digital literacy, which could lead to digital transformation, all the while undergirded by cybersecurity. He also talked about the importance of physical infrastructure to build, and also the importance of government policy that could hopefully lower the burden of businesses. For example, we should have seamless cross-border movement of goods. We should make sure our MSME are helping themselves. And he also talked about some of the key obstacles, such as the non-tariff barriers, the importance of having ASEAN single windows, which so far, in his opinion, have not been extremely successful. He mentioned the importance to strengthen collaboration to improve, he's glad to see that e-commerce has improved during the pandemic, and also the importance of having uniform digital rate as well as a well-developed tourism. Now, our next speaker is Mr. Oudet Souvannavong, who is the president of Lao National Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Lao People's Democratic Republic. Mr. Souvannavong.
Hello, good afternoon or late afternoon. When Arin has already made his oration, I don't know where to go. So, I'm representing Laos, which is in the middle of the Mekong region. We call it the Greater Mekong Sub-region. I'm also the Vice President of the Business Council there, ASEAN Business Council, founder of the Business Council, ASEAN BAC. In terms of ASEAN connectivity, of course, the traditional thing is already been raised by Mr. Arin. And of course, infrastructure and the facilities are the most important one to develop for all the countries, because the problem we have is also the gap between developed and undeveloped countries. So the connectivity could not really be made between the ASEAN countries and also at the same path, the same level. So as Laos, Cambodia, and Myanmar, we are struggling to be at the same level as Thailand, Singapore, and Malaysia. So that is also very important, that we have the same or the similar infrastructure, facilities in terms of everything, almost everything, every sector, I can say. Mr. Arin also has raised the importance of the regulation, especially border trade transport facilitation. You already mentioned that the ASEAN single window is not really working. You know, we have been trying very hard for many years. We have also in the Mekong region, we have the CBTA, the cross-border transport agreement, which is also working in some of the countries, but not all in the Mekong region. So this has to be really be addressed. And I will give you example later on that what we have trying to do in this to improve the CBTA. I think me and my friend Alfredo also will raise that. We are working together. For me, I think that connectivity concerns the supply chain. How to increase the what you call the competitiveness of our supply chain, the ASEAN supply chain. When you have the gap that's in the different countries, so supply chain need to really develop local production in Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, and so on. Develop the local industry, develop the local services. When you cannot develop those three, you will not develop the people, the knowledge. And so we need to have the people, we need to have the knowledge, and digitalization at this era is also new technology is going to help on the border trade, transport facilitation, on the port-to-port connectivity. Port-to-port means not only business, but the government to government, and also on the business to business and networking. So that is very important. I will give you an example where we try to develop. And you heard about the Lao China Railways passing through the border of China to border of Thailand through Laos. And I can tell you that only from the 3rd of December 21 to the 2nd of June 22, the Lao China Railways has transported more than 4 million tons of cargo freight. And if you, it's transit good and also import group and export group, export good, only in less than 1 year. And the trade between Laos and to Yunnan only is $1 billion US. You can see that how infrastructure can improve the connectivity, and when you have this infrastructure going on, we have trade going on. You have the connection of the people going on. You have the visits, the tourism growing. So the connectivity is there. And one thing that we see in this Lao China Railways is the connectivity through Thailand to Malaysia and to Singapore. And we are now proposing to the ADB to support a program where we can link the port to port, means the custom to customs, also the information between the different port in China, and also the different port in Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore, to be able to connect. And this is one of the connectivity, infrastructure connectivity, and connect through digitalization, through the public and private connectivity, information connection. So that is very important. And we are not going to connect through only to China. The thing that we want to do in the GMS is to connect also to the railways going to Europe, and the road going to Europe. And now, due to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, we are talking about a lower route which is going down the what you call to India and up to Turkey, and going up again to Europe. So that is one thing we have to study and to see how we can connect to the rest of the world. So in in Laos, we are working hard to get our country to be moving from landlocked to landlink. So the China Railway for linking Yunnan to Nong Khai, Thailand, is one of them. And we are expecting to get the railway coming up to Phnom Penh in the near future. And I think that some of the Chinese entrepreneurs are also proposing to the China government to do that. And also getting the road and railways crossing Thailand to Vietnam as a transversal, and also making all this Mekong region vibrant for the future economy, and to be also competing with the rest of the world, and also promoting the production of the three areas, like you said, production, local production, industry, and services. In ASEAN BAC, ASEAN Business Advisory Council, we have in terms of connectivity, we have the Singapore Connect, which is developing super port, and then they have developed already. ASEAN BAC has already developed one in Vietnam, in Haiphong, near Haiphong, and one will be developing one here in Phnom Penh, and extending this connectivity of the port to Indonesia, to Laos, and to Thailand. So this is one. It is not only for port, but also digital connectivity, smart city connectivity, and so on. So what is our recommendation to the government? The problem with ASEAN is the coordination between the different sectors, and also the different country and the gap between the countries and in the different sector as well. So we recommend that we need to improve and upgrade the public and private partnership between in all sectors, and especially in transport, supply chains, smart city, and also in implementing the master plan for ASEAN connectivity, the MPAC. So this is our proposal, so that this is needed, and I will be the one presenting that to the AEM the day after tomorrow to get this PVP going on. So I will stop here. I think if you have anything.
Thank you, Mr. Oudet Souvannavong from Laos. He talked about the importance of having similar infrastructure and facilities throughout ASEAN, that connectivity could improve the competitiveness of supply chains throughout ASEAN, and knowledge transfer is important. He also talked about the importance of border trade and port-to-port. While I was having meeting there, my wife decided with a group of his newfound friends to take a trip from the capital of Ghana, Accra, across the border to this neighboring country called Togo, to its capital, Lomé. It is supposed to be a day trip, morning going there, afternoon coming back. But they ended up spending half the trip, not on the roads, but at the border, at the border crossing into Togo, and from Togo crossing into Ghana. And when they came back, it was already late in the night. So that shows you in Africa, I think they still have a lot to learn from, hopefully, ASEAN. Mr. Souvannavong also talked about the rail connectivity between Thailand and China, which improved trade and people's tourism and so on in Laos, so that Laos became a land-linked country from a landlocked country. The problem, as he sees it, is the coordination between different sectors and sometimes between different ASEAN member states. He thinks it's very important to work towards the implementation of the ASEAN Connectivity Master Plan. So our next speaker will be Mr. Alfredo Perdiguero, Director of Regional Cooperation Operations Coordination Division, Southeast Asia Department of ADB, the Asian Development Bank based in the Philippines. Mr. Perdiguero.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I would like to start by saying that actually ASEAN is already very connected. It's maybe more connected than ever, or maybe it was more connected than ever has been, at least until COVID came up. And of course, then we have all realized about what are the problems when we are not truly connected and what happens when actually the borders actually close. It affected to all of us personally. It affected trade. It affected the value change. We are just actually preparing in ADB a new study on ASEAN value chains and how can we regenerate and make them stronger. And we are realizing that they were actually quite significantly affected as trade was affected, at least for a short period of time. So they're very resilient somehow, but the connectivity is something that we all know and we all can feel with numbers, with figures, and with ourselves that how important it is for the economy, how important it is for even politically, to feel that you are connected. Also, we are always talking about connectivity within ASEAN, and I think this is important. More efforts needs to be done, but ASEAN has been always very famous for being an open sub-region, an open region. So you are also want to keep connecting with others. So when we talk about trade, it's not all about increasing intra-regional trade also, only, which has remained, by the way, many people say, well, that has remained at 25% constantly for decades, actually, already now in ASEAN. That's true, but that is because actually trade has been growing as a whole. So you are trading more with the rest of the world, and you are trading more among yourselves while keeping this 25% on average of intra-regional trade. So that's okay. There is a certain level of connectivity. You want to continue expanding this connectivity across ASEAN, but you want to keep also ASEAN connected well to the rest of the world. Very importantly, what are the key elements for that? I think the other speakers also referred to infrastructure connectivity. In ADB, as you know, we have calculated how much infrastructure gap still ASEAN has. It came out as a very big figure. I think it was 210 billion. That a lot of efforts needs to be done still to keep building. So I would agree with Mr. Jira that we need to keep building actually infrastructure in transport, in energy, and of course now in ICT, which is creating even bigger demands. So probably what we calculated in ADB about 7 years ago about infrastructure needs is now outdated, and we need to have some kind of updating because the new digital economy is actually increasing even the demands. It's creating even new demands for that. There is some new infrastructure that is becoming more important also, and it will become, I think, more important, which is very expensive, and this is, of course, railways. With climate change, I don't know if we need and we have to continue building and building too many more roads. We did recently a study in the poorest part of ASEAN, the Greater Mekong sub-region, and we realized that actually the main and most important roads are probably already built. Of course, you need to keep upgrading them, you need to maintain them, but you know, there will be other costs. And as the example well recognized now by Mr. Oudet was how effective, if you have effective railways, that will enhance connectivity significantly. It will make it maybe cheaper, and it will make it definitely more environmentally sustainable. So but it's very expensive. And that is why I want to go with and discuss the issue of money, because connectivity infrastructure is expensive and you need money. Me being from ADB and everybody, I go to a conference and say, what is the money to build this? So I want to refer to that because I think this is very, very important. In order to build that connectivity infrastructure, you need to do several things. Number one, the governments need to have more resources. We are working very hard in ADB to working with many governments on how can you increase domestic resource mobilization. At the moment, the governments collect too little taxes from people. So this needs to increase. And some of you that are paying taxes may say that should not be. But I tell you, you are still paying little taxes, really. Individuals and companies, they still pay little taxes. The governments have a very important play to role if you want to actually build that connectivity infrastructure. And there are ways to do that in efficient ways. You don't want to overwhelm, of course, neither business or individuals with too much taxes. Efficiency is very important in the way in which you spend the money for that infrastructure also. Of course, the private sector has a very important role to play, but they are not yet playing that role so much. Not in all countries, really, the private sector is given the opportunities. We need to work, the governments need to work very closely with private sector to give the opportunity for them to enter into this market. There is a lot of money out there, even from institutional investors, and they are not investing in infrastructure for connectivity. So there's a lot to work to do to that, to create opportunities and fair profits to the private sector, but also to increase the competitiveness, the competition of the private sector really on how to build that infrastructure. And the infrastructure, by the way, needs to be also resilient. You can see that you don't want to build a road now, and with the problems of climate change, after a few years, that road simply disappear. You need to ensure also that there is strong institutions that collect enough also money to maintain and operate that infrastructure. Otherwise, you will build it, and again, after a few years, especially with climate change, that will be wiped out, and as we have seen across the region in several occasions already. So this is a challenge, the building of the infrastructure. There are many opportunities to do so. There are some, for example, I put you an example since I'm the administrator of it. The ASEAN countries decided to create the ASEAN Infrastructure Fund. And of course, that creates enormous opportunities to build infrastructure, but it's very small. I administer this fund. It's $500 million fund only. This fund could and should be probably much bigger. We have created now the ASEAN Catalytic Green Facility, which is under the ASEAN Infrastructure Fund, $2 billion. Many partners from outside, from Europe, from Korea, they want to help ASEAN. So you need to maximize also the funds and the opportunities of many partners. We talk about partners that want to help ASEAN in a previous session. Many partners that want and they would like to help ASEAN, but they don't know how because there's no vehicle. So the ASEAN Infrastructure Fund is a good vehicle to do so and to develop and expand infrastructure financing for connectivity. This is a good example. You created, you put a lot of effort. It's now 10 years old. Maybe it's time to keep expanding this fund. On digital connectivity, I don't have the time to cover all of them, but I mean on energy connectivity, very important area. We work together, by the way, we work together. My colleague just mentioned the Greater Mekong sub-region. It's very important that the sub-regions work together with ASEAN, and we are now trying to do that. And energy connectivity is one of the areas in which we are starting to work very closely, both ASEAN and the GMS, for example. In digital connectivity, it's not only about building the infrastructure, because that is good, but it's also about maximizing opportunities. The people don't know how to use that, the digital. So I think Mr. Jira has mentioned about the digital gap and also about the need to improve resources in companies and also in individuals and in governments to maximize the utilization of that, of those great opportunities there. The hardware is very important, but the software is even more important. And there is a lot of regulatory problems. My colleague here knows very well, better than me because they suffer it. It's not about building the road also, it's about the transport facilitation, the trade facilitation. It's about the same will happen in railways when the railways are being built. How actually those railways, those trains can go from country A to country C, going through country B. And those regulatory problems exist also in the energy sector. It's also still very difficult to export electricity from country A to country C, going through country B. That's difficult, but this is important. So regulatory aspects are also critical. I would say that even, and last point, maybe the industry is also very important. It's not also building the infrastructure, but our industries really, for example, the transport industry needs to open up to other countries also. You know, this is very risky in your country. Your country may not be, your industry may not be able to compete with the neighboring country transport industry, and that's why there are barriers. Of course, you want to protect your industry, you want to support it. But if you protect too much your local industry in transport, this will affect the competitiveness of all the other sectors that will have to pay much more money to ensure or to access to the goods that are transported within your country. So you need to find a balance. You want to protect your industry, keep enhancing them, but also open up progressively. And that will, can help. And sometimes you may need even some consolidation. Everybody talks about SMEs, and I also think that SMEs should be strongly supported, but some industries require maybe some consolidation. We saw that in banking industry. This may need to happen. You also don't want to build infrastructure for connectivity everywhere. Every governor wants to have its own port and its own airport. Well, I tell you, this is not good. That will not be a good thing to do. I mean, I come from my own country in Spain. It happened the same. And I come from Spain, and every province wanted to have their airports. Some of them are abandoned now. And the other day, they were selling an airport for €1. €1, because nobody wanted even to have it. So you don't want those mistakes to happen in ASEAN. You want to ensure that the infrastructure you build for connectivity is done in a logical way and to ensure maximum competitiveness and has quality. Quality infrastructure principles are important. Let me finish with one point, which I think was one of the questions on peoples-to-peoples connectivity. We always forget about that. I think it's a very important element, very different than what I was talking about infrastructure and about hardware and software. But you have to ensure that also people are connecting. And there are many things that are needed to do so. I think tourism, of course, is very important, ensuring that tourists move across ASEAN. Twin cities, for example, twinning of cities, that creates a lot of good friendships and connectivity among people, peoples to people. You can create programs such as the one that we have in Europe. I was a student. They pay me a scholarship to move from Spain to Germany to study in another university for a while, and they give me very small scholarship, I have to say. I have even to work. It was very small. But that is actually possible to do also in ASEAN. You need to do much more to ensure that there is exchange of students, exchange of professors. The politicians and the business, they have their resources, and I think they are already well connected. But I think these other even trade unions, they may not have the resources to do so. And I think that will be very important to truly connect ASEAN with itself. Let me stop there.
Mr. Perdiguero emphasized the importance of the resilience of connectivity, how important it is to economy and politics, that we should emphasize both connectivity within and outside of ASEAN, or place equal importance. He re-emphasized the infrastructure gap mentioned by previous speakers. That is indeed important to continue to build transport, energy, and ICT infrastructure. He mentioned the efficacy of building roads versus building railways, emphasized the importance of money, that government should perhaps revisit some of their taxation structure, perhaps to the dismay of some of our businessmen friends here. He'll talk about there should be strong institution for maintenance for quality infrastructure, and that ASEAN Infrastructure Fund is a good vehicle for partners to invest in ASEAN infrastructure. He gave the example of the Greater Mekong sub-region working together with ASEAN in enabling energy connectivity. And then for digital connectivity, he also felt that there was a gap and that hardware and software are equally important. Well, there are regulatory problems within ASEAN. For example, how to export energy or link transport infrastructure through third country. And we should open up local competition, for example, in transport. We should balance opening up local competition versus protecting it. and sometimes there's a need for consolidation. On people-to-people bonds, he mentioned besides tourism, we should also try out twin city arrangements as well as scholarships for exchange. Our next speaker would be from Brunei, Darussalam. He is Mr. Shazali Sulaiman, founder and partner of Shazali and Partners and chairman of Brunei International Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you very much. This is my first time that I'm speaking in person after 2 years of actually presenting virtually. And when I saw the people presenting virtually, now I feel, you know, I sympathize with them. Because when you present virtually, when is your turn to speak? You're actually speaking to a mirror. Because when I put my screen on, I'm talking to myself. And although I am connected to the forum, I feel disconnected with the audience. And this is what connectivity is all about. Because when we look at connectivity, we need to connect with not only, you know, with the people you're dealing with. Digitalization, yes, brings us close, but it brings us further away from the human contact, the people-to-people contact. We need to be close to our customers, our staff. I lecture at the university, virtually. And the sad thing with my lecture last year, I didn't even know a single of my 48 students, because everything was done virtually, you know. And I have their name on the screen, but I don't even know what they look like. So it was a bit sad. And I think when you talk about people to people, it is important that we have face-to-face, no matter what. And I think a conference like this, you know, I get to know, I can feel and touch my panelists, well, not touch in a proper way, and also the audience, yeah? And that's what connectivity is all about. So, yes, yeah, that's, okay. It's quite interesting that ADB talked about taxes. I've not paid taxes since 1999 in Brunei, because we have no tax in Brunei. So if I were to recommend that to His Majesty about taxes in Brunei, I'm sure I'll not be very popular, you know, after coming from Cambodia. But I think the important thing about what I want to do is share the experience in Brunei in terms of what we did over the last 2 years during the COVID. Brunei is a small country surrounded by 2 Malaysian states in the Borneo Island. So we're in an island, which means we're remote from everybody else. And in order to get proper access to Brunei, you need to either go by air or by sea. And one of the biggest problems with Brunei is we're not self-sufficient in terms of our food security. And we need to rely on the sea freight, air freight for our food and a lot of our supplies. And because of COVID and because of the lack of connectivity to Brunei, because of the small population of 460,000, it's too expensive to have frequent transshipment to Brunei or freight to Brunei. Inflation increased significantly in Brunei. The food started to increase quite a lot. Just as an example, my favorite lamb chop used to be about $8 per kilo. It's about $30 per kilo now. You know, it's increased by 3-4 times, as an example. So I have to bring down and eat something else, you know, which is a bit more healthier, I think, considering when you look at me. So my wife said, eat healthier, eat more vegetables. But even vegetables also is not easy to get. So what happened from 1st August, and also we closed the road access. So we couldn't go to Malaysia, yeah, because the closest state to country to Brunei is Malaysia. From 1st August, His Majesty approved the opening of the road borders, road access to Malaysia. And what happens is, there was more free flow of goods, services, or people across the border by road. And because of that, food stuff, your normal, what do you call it, the things that your day-to-day stuff started to get a bit more cheaper because there's more access, easier access. And I think it was very important that the borders was open because then we are no longer insulated, and, you know, under, you know, it's like they call it a frog under the coconut where you're totally insulated in your own economy. So we were able to avail ourselves of the more globalized economy of accessibility in terms of the opening of the border. But obviously during COVID, a lot of business suffered. And the way forward was digitalization. Digitalize the economy, capacity building, human capacity building of SMEs. What His Majesty did was, he came up with an incentive, an initiative where the government provided free training, capacity building on digitalization, digital economy, internet, e-commerce, and everything else for the SMEs, MSMEs, because they know they had no money to pay for these courses, and the government provided the services. So to prepare them for when the economy opens, then at least the SMEs could have, can actually increase their capacity in terms of how to deal with the digitalized economy. And being a small economy, obviously, we needed to look outside Brunei. And the most obvious place to look outside Brunei is the Borneo Island itself. So the Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines, East ASEAN growth area as a start, because we cannot expect to jump straight to to Malaysia, Singapore, and all the other much more advanced economy, because our SMEs or MSMEs were not ready to go out of Brunei. And I think one of the big problems we had with now doing a lot of business online is you don't know who your suppliers are. You don't do enough due diligence of suppliers. You buy from Mr. A, Mr. B. Sometimes when the product comes eventually, it is not up to standard. Sometimes when you buy foodstuff overseas, and because the transshipment time takes a long time, the time that is kept in the port, by the time it comes out, it's already either expired or the food has perished. So we had a lot of problem from that area. But I think what the most important thing that government needs to do if we want the Bruneians SMEs to prepare themselves to be connected to the ASEAN is to ensure that we have a very reliable digital infrastructure. And to me, the most important thing is when you look at the digitalized economy, connectivity, affordability, reliability. If you don't have this, then there's no point being the digitalized economy. And like any infrastructure development, and a lot of development, we cannot borrow from ADB because they don't allow us to borrow money for infrastructure. So we have to find the money ourselves. As a sovereign state that has no foreign debt, and as we contribute money to ADB, the government actually provides all the funding for all the infrastructure development. And one of the biggest development when, Mr. Oudet was talking about the road infrastructure. In order for us to get from the southern part to the northern part of Brunei, we had to go through Limbang, which is part of Malaysia. But because of COVID, the government enhanced, and there's a catalyst, got the construction of the bridge from one part to another, which is 36 kilometers done in pretty fast time. So we have much quicker access. And now for us to drive from town to KK, which is in Sabah, we can save 1.5 to 2 hours driving time because of the bridge that has been done to connect from one part of Brunei to another. So COVID is a blessing in a sense that a lot of things had to be done very quickly. The digitalization, the e-payment, e-gate, everything was done quite fast. The infrastructure was done quite fast. We had enhanced the port facilities, but obviously nobody wants to come to Brunei because of the small population. And I think one of the speakers, our friend from Thailand with the shorter surname, was talking about losing your phone. I think one of the biggest problem I have is, I got COVID when I was in London last month, and I'm losing my memory. I forget things. That's why I'm writing things down. I never usually write things down. And just like an iCloud, if you don't buy enough space, you don't have enough memory. My children said, Daddy, you're suffering from brain cloud. I've never heard the word brain clouding. In other words, my memory is going. And I think one of the biggest problems people my age is remembering password. Simple thing, even digital banking, you have different banks, you have different password, different digits, different numbers. Oh, okay, yeah. I don't want to only look good outside, I need to look good inside as well. But also, the digitalized economy has also got its challenges for people who are, 60 and above. I'm 61 next week. I'm celebrating my double 61, which is, I was born in 1961, and I'm going to be 61 this year, so we call it the double 61. But hopefully, with a lot of help from everybody else, we will be able to help. But digitalization is a challenge for people slightly older. But what we do in Brunei is we try to reskill, retrain, re-educate people even at the older level. Singapore is doing it well. Education for all, no matter how old, you can be educated until you die, and you never stop learning. And conferences, forums like this, discussion like this on KSI, I always learn something new every day. And long may the hold that we have face-to-face conferences rather than me on the screen up there. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Shazali, who treasures face-to-face connectivity. He emphasized the importance of food resilience and resilience of other supplies for for small countries such as Brunei. That during the pandemic, the government of Brunei provided a lot of reskilling and training in digitalization as part of their capacity building efforts for especially the MSMEs. I have a particular interest in, I think you mentioned BIM Yaga, right? The Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, East Asian Growth region, that Brunei has to focus on BIM Yaga. Indeed, I will call on Brunei to take a proactive leadership of BIM Yaga because for other BIM Yaga member states such as my own Malaysia, the Philippines and Indonesia, it involves only parts of their countries. In Malaysia, it involves Sabah and Sarawak. In Indonesia, Kalimantan and the Moluccas. And in Philippines, the southern parts of Philippines. Whereas in Brunei, your whole country is within BIM Yaga. So you have to take a more proactive part, especially, I think, on the money side. You can provide more funding. We all look very forward to that. Your beach building acceleration could also start from there. Okay, so we have our, thank you very much, Mr. Shazali. We have our next speaker, who is a long-time good friend of mine, Professor Dr. Chin Yu Sing, originally from Malaysia, but today I'm very surprised you're actually representing Thailand, isn't it? As advisor for the One Belt, One Road Association of Thailand. So, Professor Chin.
Okay, it's almost it's very good, very not easy to talk at the last session. Most of the people either will be sleepy or Okay. Today I'm supposed to talk about this ASEAN connectivity. Before I will touch on this ASEAN connectivity, we have to look at some of the events in the past. First industrial revolutions was driven by the use of steam engine. So the second industrial revolution was driven by the use of petrol. You can see then the third industrial revolution also was driven by the use of petrol. Now we are in the fourth industrial revolution. It's driven by the use of digital technologies. So one of the 5 pillars of this ASEAN, the master plan of ASEAN Connectivity 2025 is touching on these technological innovations. So you see how important is innovations, which can really help a country to grow faster. Because according to a study, these are ASEAN in 2030, just by the use of the digital economy, it can generate extra income of 625 billion in 2030. So this is this digital technology can really help a country to grow faster because it can cut down the stages of the industry development of a country. Normally, when a country go for this industry development, normally they go through the few stages like imitations, improvement, innovations, and invention, 4I. So by the use of digital technologies, it can cut short a lot of stages so the country can go faster. So that's why ASEAN, one of the pillars mentioned about technological innovation, they already can see the importance. Before we look at how important is this digital innovation, we have to look at China. China can become so prosperous in less than 40 years because of 2 things only. First thing, they build prosperity through the construction of infrastructures. This infrastructure I will break down into either the physical infrastructure and the digital infrastructure. That also how China can eradicate absolute poverty in less than 40 years 770 million, the population even more than whole ASEAN. ASEAN is about 630 million population. And live the only country in the world that don't have any absolute poverty in the population. You look at US so advanced, but you can see how some of them are they're so poor, like living in a third world country, you see. But China, by the use of this physical infrastructure and digital infrastructure that can eradicate absolute poverty in less than 40 years. So I think ASEAN can really learn from China by using these two approaches. Why this physical infrastructure is important? Because Chinese always believe that you want to make money, you have to build road, to construct road first. Because if there's no accessibility, especially those rural areas, how they're going to sell their products? They cannot, you cannot access to them because a lot of these poor people, they're living at the mountainous areas. So accessibility to the city is very difficult. That's why the constructions of this infrastructure, the connectivity is very important. That's why I term this one as physical connectivity or hardware connectivity. So this China is doing very well. China has constructed 200,000 kilometers of expressway. US, so many years of advancement, they only able to construct about 98,000 kilometers of expressways only. China's already got 200,000 kilometer expressway, but the mileage is keep on increasing. No, US is just stagnant already. US there's no development at all after so many years, because they spent 20 years in fighting terrorism all over the world. That's why this for the past 20 years they're more like stagnant there. There's no development at all, and they don't want to develop, construct anything also. It's not easy because of the so many restrictions and the government regulation, all this. So it's not easy. So China have this 37,900 kilometers high-speed railway. This is also the longest in the world. The whole world, all the high-speed railroad added up together, also you cannot compare with China. So that's why, and then China got 7 out of 10 largest ports in the world. So you can see how important is a physical connectivity, how a country can achieve advancement in less than 40 years. So it's because of these two things, physical connectivity and digital connectivity. And another thing that China can really eradicate absolute poverty because they use a lot of these what we call digital technologies like e-commerce, cloud computing, AI, robots, big data, all these things. Because you know, those rural areas, you can build the infrastructure, but they want to sell the products. Of course, you need to use e-commerce. That is very important, so that their product can be sold to the other parts of the city or other countries. So this one, with the physical infrastructure, is not good enough. It has to be complemented by digital connectivity. So that's why China can do so well. I think ASEAN can do that. That's why ASEAN actually each year have to spend 110 billion USD to build infrastructure. But for the last 10 to 15 years, I think this amount is too big for ASEAN country to sustain 110 billion each year. So that's why I think ASEAN need to cooperate with this China in order to develop faster. This is very important because China got the ASEAN infrastructure, ASEAN Infrastructure Investment Bank. So this one can help these highways, high-speed railways, all these things. So when the whole country is physically connected, like China, you can see they're so physically connected. That means the access route can reach all parts of the rural areas. So when the country is fully connected, just like ASEAN is fully connected and being fully integrated, then the people-to-people connectivity also closer, because when the infrastructure is so good, then you can promote the what I call the tourism industry, the education industry, and then you can promote the culture industry, all these things, so the people would get connected. So the ASEAN can become one regional bloc like that. So regional group. So you want the ASEAN to do better. I think first thing ASEAN have to build infrastructure. Of course, if ASEAN themselves need to come up with so much money, 110 billion USD to build the infrastructure. I think it will take a long time. That's why I think the faster way is to cooperate with China through this One Belt, One Road initiative, so you can help this ASEAN country to grow faster. Because why infrastructure is so important? First thing, when you have better infrastructure, you can cut down the cost of transportation. So in a way, you will cut down the cost of doing business. So this is very important. So when the cost of doing business is lower, so you can make a country more competitive internationally. So more foreign investment will come in, because if the whole country is fully connected, so for businessmen it's very easy to transport their goods to the port, to the airport, all these things. So it's very convenient for them to do investment in that country. So I think this is very important. Another thing is the digital technology also. You have to really embark on this digital technology, because digital technology is what I call that can really help a country to grow faster. Just by doing the normal way of industrialization, it will take many years. But by using these digital technologies, it can really cut down the number of years for going to be what I call a more industrialized country. So that's why I think ASEAN countries really need to be fully connected. And then there's China, there's a plan to have the Pan-Asia railway. This one I think is very important. From this Singapore to Malaysia and then join with the Kunming. If this railway can be realized in maybe in another 10 years time, so I think the ASEAN and China will be fully integrated. So I think in a way, ASEAN can develop faster. Because in the whole world, you can see now, only China can really help this ASEAN to really, what I call, to invest in this infrastructure. Because you look at the 20 largest infrastructure company in the world. 14 largest infrastructure company in the world from China. 3 from these European countries. And 3 companies from these Japan and Korea. So that means China got 14 largest infrastructure. So you want to build infrastructures, you only can rely on China. This is a fact. So I give you so many data, you can see this one, whether ASEAN really like it or not, but only China can really help them to build all this infrastructure, because China got so much experience in building all these bridges, highway, railroads, all these things. So I think, so China, this ASEAN need to work closely with China, because China is something like very close to this ASEAN, see, like neighbors only. See. So I think in terms of proximity, so ASEAN cannot rely on this Western country, because in a way, economically, they are not rich anymore. You can charge this US only talking about forcing people to join them only. They are not giving you any benefits. They got no money to give to you, no. Like the other day, 10 ASEAN head of country go to see the President Joe Biden, how much they give ASEAN? 150 million for 10 countries. So how much you share? China give how much this what I call they want to buy agricultural product from ASEAN, how many $billion? So you can see whether we like it or not, I think we have to work closely with China in order for ASEAN to be more prosperous. Because I think China first regional bloc will help will be ASEAN, because of the political reason, security reason, and also because of cultural reason. So I think we got advantages, because we are just the backyard of this China. So they have to take good care of this ASEAN in order for China to be more security wise, to be more stable, and also good for them. Because China always believes that you have to enrich your neighbors, not to make your neighbors become your enemies. So that the country, because Chinese culture is always, we want to make money, not like Western country, they want to conquer people. China never conquer any people. I mean, talking about, looking at the history, to talk about this Mongolian dynasty, the time, but all the Chinese history, you know, they're only interested in doing business only. So you can see they never build any navy base all over the world. Not like US, you see. They only want to set up all business in other countries. So I think we have to work closely with China for the sake of prosperity for all the ASEAN people. Because I also Malaysian now, so I also, of course, have this feeling that not because I'm a Chinese, but because you look at the facts I have given you. So I think the only country that can help ASEAN to do better will be China. Because you look at the trade figure now, it's 878 billion. The trade figure for whole ASEAN is so large, you know, the figure. So I think, so with this close relationship, and then China also, there is a duty for China to see ASEAN doing better, because when ASEAN is doing better, ASEAN can buy more advanced products from China also. It's good for everybody. Right? So I think with this, I think, because nobody touching about China part, so I will spend some time, because I'm a advisor to this Global One Belt One Road Association, so I will have a better study on these things. So that's why I propose that ASEAN should work closely with China for the sake of our security and prosperity. Thank you very much.
Professor Chin Yu Sin started with the history of industrial revolutions, the importance of innovation, and then spend a lot of time talking about China's prosperity and how that was enhanced by building physical and digital infrastructure. He is very keen on promoting China and ASEAN collaborations. So we have the last speaker from Indonesia, Mr. Johannes Lukiman, who is the alternate chair for ASEAN Business Advisory Council. Of course, Mr. Lukiman will be our last speaker, and it is simply him between you and your tea time. So I think you will get his hint. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, you said that this was the toughest panel, and I think I have the toughest panelist position. So I'll try to be brief. In Indonesia, at this point in the day, we like to say good morning so that everyone has the morning spirit. But the question that we're addressing here right now is, how can ASEAN connectivity be enhanced? And it's a very appropriate question for me to address, because Indonesia will be the chair of ASEAN next year, which is a big privilege. And I believe that ASEAN connectivity can be enhanced in 3 major ways. So we've already spoken at length about infrastructure development and supply chain development. I won't touch upon that topic anymore. But I do want to talk about digital infrastructure. And I feel that I am positioned well to speak about that, because I had been given the privilege by President Joko Widodo to be the policy manager for the B20 Digitalization Task Force, where we have over 200 companies representing 1.5 trillion gross revenue, all of them CEOs, herding them to produce a policy advocation paper to the G20 government leaders. And we spoke about digital infrastructure at length. So what did we talk about? We talked about foundational digital infrastructure. The previous G20 cycle presidency was run by Italy. That is an aging industrial country seeking to digitalize its aging infrastructure and industrial sector. But we in Indonesia are an emerging economy seeking to make a quantum leap from a heavily industrialized nation going straight into a digitalized nation, into a digital knowledge-based economy. So we need foundational digital infrastructure. What does that mean? We need things like digital identity. We need things like digital signature, standardized APIs, and so forth. We, of course, must ensure that in this part of the world, within ASEAN, everyone has access to connectivity. Universal connectivity is no longer a privilege, but it has become a fundamental human right. You cannot say that someone is living the best life that they can if they don't have access to the internet. We should provide digital on-ramps for MSMEs to participate in the digital economy. And we should also be worried about the new risks that the digital economy poses. And therefore, we should be extra vigilant on cybersecurity. Other things that I want to mention is the platform economy. So in ASEAN right now, you have a balkanized sort of platform economy structure. You have the domestic champions, which are the platforms that serve domestic purposes from domestic suppliers. And then you have certain pan-Asian, pan-ASEAN players who import goods from a specific nation and act as a funnel into ASEAN to sell those goods. We do not have players yet that specialize specifically on bringing ASEAN goods to ASEAN people. So we should definitely develop that. Regional payment rails should be expanded. I'm very glad to say that Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand have launched QR code interoperability. Now, as a former banker, of course, I wouldn't be happy because that cuts my fee-based income very severely. But it is great for people and it is great for mobility. I think my esteemed fellow panelist, Mr. Alfredo, talked about increasing taxes. Well, it was mentioned before that industrial revolutions run on different things. Previously, industrial revolutions were run on steam, on burning things. Well, this industrial revolution is based on data, on technology. Our oil is data, but data is leaving ASEAN shores and ASEAN countries, and value is being added on that data and it's being processed overseas without any of our governments seeing any benefit, let alone the individuals who own this data. So we at the B20 and Indonesia's presidency of the B20 are a strong proponent of free flow of data, however, with preconditions of trust and assurance. I'd also like to mention the third prong. So we've mentioned logistics and supply chain, we mentioned digital infrastructure. The next and the last is health and biosecurity infrastructure. Some of the things that are mentioned before, the problems of perishables rotting at the border, huge backups at borders for people ingress and outgressing out of countries. These are also largely based on the lack of digital infrastructure for immigration, for vaccine compatibility, for biosecurity of perishable goods. Luckily, the ASEAN senior officials meeting in Bali for healthcare officials, I believe it was the 15th meeting, had agreed that Indonesia should take the lead for creating a vaccine compatibility hub. And we have done so and it's now being rolled out. I'm also happy to announce that as part of Brunei's chairmanship of ASEAN last year, they had initiated the ASEAN Travel Wallet Scheme, which is now being built as a container for both digital identity and digital vaccine compatibility checking so that we can travel across this region much more easily. Because I think we're all fooling ourselves if we believe that this is the last pandemic that will ever happen. We'll see another one maybe in 4 or 5 years, depending on whose statistical analysis you believe. And at that point, we can no longer afford to just simply close the borders, close our logistics and supply chains. That would be suicide. And if anything, pandemics will become more severe. So what do we need to do? We need to allow mobility with appropriate safeguards. These safeguards should be systemized. They should be digital. Now, I'd also like to touch upon one part which a fellow panelist mentioned, which is multilateralism or the openness of ASEAN. I do agree with my fellow panelists that China is going to be a great force in ASEAN for the years to come. That's why Indonesia will be insisting that all ASEAN members agree, sign, and promulgate our CEP. These 15 countries that are members of it will be the driver of the economy in the next decade. However, there's also CPTPP. There's also IPEF, even though, as you mentioned, the fiscal incentives to join it are rather lesser. And there's also the smaller digital economy pact of DEPA. We need to be involved in all of these FTAs. And moreover, I'd like to close with the fact that we should be involved with one single voice. ASEAN centrality was key to the founding of ASEAN, and it should be still key to the way that we communicate with third parties like China, like South Korea, like the US. With one voice, we have so much more of a stronger bargaining position when it comes to negotiations, when it comes to extracting the best deal that we can get. Because let's not be shy. FTAs are about getting the best deal that we can. And we can only get the best deal that we can if we maintain one voice, and that's why Indonesia will be pushing very hard to bring ASEAN centrality to the front of our agenda next year. Thank you.
Very nice and very crisp. Mr. Lukiman talked about the importance of fundamental digital infrastructure, such as your digital ID, such as universal access, and digital on-ramp for MSME. All these undergirded by cyber security, and also the importance of logistic and supply chain, that we must have mobility with safeguards, and we must also have healthcare connectivity where we have compatibility of vaccination and biosecurity. He also closed with the importance of multilateralism, that we should sign and implement all these free trade agreements such as RCEP, CPTPP, IPEF, and DEPA, and that we must do so with ASEAN centrality, speaking with one voice, so that we can indeed have the most benefits for ASEAN as a whole. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please give our panelists a big hand. And in the interest of time, actually mainly in your own interest, we perhaps would not have questions during this session, but please feel free to approach the speakers during the impending afternoon tea break. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, moderator and the panel. I'd like to invite the panel to come on to the front for a photography session. So you can stand and pose at the front.